Critics are calling the Scorch Trials exhilarating, phenomenal. It's downright electric. Maze Runner, the Scorch Trial, rated PG-13. Critics are calling the Scorch Trials exhilarating, phenomenal. The Scorch Trial, rated PG-13. Critics are calling the Scorch Trials exhilarating.
Alright, we're live. Sorry I'm a little late today. Running a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. Still got a lot to talk about on the Fantasy Football Show this week. Getting a little bit of feedback. Alright, we're live. Sorry I'm a little late today. There we go. Alright, so what we're going to talk about this week is basically go over... My bad. Wrong page. There we go. Go over the Thursday Night Football recap between the Broncos and the Chiefs, which was a really good and entertaining game. I gotta give it to them. It was a good and entertaining game. Definitely had me watching. Thursday Night Football in the past has been kind of boring sometimes, but definitely had a good game this time. And we're going to talk about the fantasy recap, of course, of that, and one conversation that I really want to have, and I've had it with a couple of my people who are in my money league with me, about whether or not Peyton Manning is done, and whether or not he has anything left in the tank, and some arguments for, some arguments against, but mainly what I see in his play, and what I think he's going to do from a fantasy perspective. The other things we can talk about are some key matchups on Sunday, some games that I really think we're going to have some major fantasy implications. Talk about last week a little bit. I don't want to go too far into it, and I'll touch on that in a little bit later. But on starting next week, I'm going to go to a schedule of 2 streams dedicated to Fantasy Football a week. There'll still be this show on Friday, starting at 6, but there will also be a Tuesday stream. And on the Tuesday stream, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Monday Night Football. We're going to talk about the weekend recap, kind of going through some of the fantasy leagues that you may have, some fantasy leagues that I may have, see what we did right, what we did wrong, mistakes we made, and hopefully help our teams going forward. And then the last thing is we'll tackle the waiver wire at that point. We'll look at some waiver wire targets, some sleepers, and hopefully that also will help strengthen the community's teams and help us do better in the future. So those are the 3 things that are going to go into the Tuesday show. A recap of Sunday, recap of Monday night, kind of as the one thing, as a game recap. Waiver wire talk, and going over our own teams stat-wise and seeing what we did right or wrong. So, getting into it, again, if you're new to the stream, my name is Clayton, and I'm here to talk about fantasy football. Actually, let me just do this really quickly. Okay, hopefully this worked. I think that it had me set as, a Destiny stream. So somebody popped in and saw it wasn't Destiny and left. But to go back to what I was talking about, what we talk about on this show is fantasy football, and we're treating it kind of as a real-time strategy game, because you have to put your pieces in place. It's kind of like Risk. There's a strategy to it, There's an understanding and handicapping to professional football, but also in how we treat it from a statistical point of view, and how we look at fantasy football and how we treat it as a game, how it's fun, how it's exciting, how it gets us more into football, and not just our own teams, but about more interesting players, more interested in personalities, and that is very much like gaming, and it's inherently tied. I mean, Madden football has fantasy stats in it. Video games now understand fantasy is a legitimate thing and it's intrinsically tied to their products. And I think that on Twitch, the community, there's a huge overlap, I feel, in gamers and people who enjoy sports, enjoy playing fantasy football from a competitive place, from a place of understanding and liking the game. And I just think that this show, hopefully, we can build a community around, and we can get together weekly, a couple times a week, and just talk about this thing we all like to do and all like to play. So, without much further ado, let's go into the recap of last night's game. And of course, as we are going to do for everything, we're going to look at this from fantasy football perspective and how really interesting it was. I mean, you had a game that if you watched it for the first quarter, you didn't see any scoring. The second quarter, slow. Jamal Charles got in the end zone. It was a game that seemed paced to kind of go to the question that we're going to get to after we talk about the game and Peyton Manning, who I talked about a little bit last week, and I'm going to bring up that conversation again. We have, like, in this photo, you'll see Jamal Charles had a good game statistically, but a bad game in reality. His two fumbles proved to be the difference in the game. His first led to a field goal, the game-tying field goal, and his second was returned for a touchdown and cost the Chiefs the football game. From a fantasy standpoint, it really hurt. Obviously, losing 4 points hurts, but he still had over 120 yards. He still had a touchdown. I mean, he had a good game. But how does this impact him going forward? It's interesting because Nile Davis got a big red zone carry that led him to getting a touchdown. So I don't know. It's not going to end up being a committee situation. If you have Jamal Charles, don't panic. It's just two fumbles. If anything, it will make sure that he is more secure with the ball in the future. But it's just an interesting thing to point out and something to be wary of. But the other thing I noticed, Jamal Charles took some decent hits against a very good Broncos defense and seemed to be fine. Like, there was any concussion symptoms. When he had a second fumble, he slammed his helmet again. He was very involved in the game. And Jamal Charles, a lot of people avoid because of injury risk. He was lost for one season, several seasons ago, and people seem to not be able to forgive him for it. So what everybody's hoping, especially Kansas City Chiefs fans, is that he stays up for the whole season. And I think he's on pace. Like, the Chiefs are using him in a much better way than they have been. They're getting him in space. They're not sending him into the line like full blast. They're using Niles Davis a little bit more effectively. And I think Niles Davis is definitely the handcuff of handcuffs in all of football. Because one, Jamal Charles does have an injury history. But two, Niles Davis has some standalone value. Niles Davis will come into a game to spell Jamal Charles in second, third, and short situations where they might hand the ball off and expect a run defense. Jamal Charles is not a plower. He's not a big guy. And Niles Davis provides the Chiefs with some of that beef, some of that threat of just hammering into a hole, nothing fancy, but just getting into the hole, getting a couple yards, getting a first down, or on the goal line. And it's important to note that Jamal Charles' goal line touchdown was on a pass. It was on a swing pass. It wasn't a rush. So that is kind of showcases what you need to know about the Chiefs' offense. Alex Smith, it was an outside run because Alex Smith ended up the game without a touchdown. So it was kind of a swing play, but it wasn't a run that was through the tackles. And that's where Niles Davis is. Niles Davis is the dude who's going to get the handoff, go through the tackle, and maybe cut outside. Jamal Charles, I think it's sweep. It might have been a sweep. But all in all, the Chiefs side of the ball still, Alex Smith threw 2 interceptions and is still not a quarterback who's going to get the ball to his receivers. Jeremy Maclin, who a lot of people were high on, had a couple decent catches, but overall his stats just did not showcase that he was. I find it hard to say that Jeremy Maclin is a viable fantasy option, just because there are some very good receivers out there. One receiver who had a good week was Demaryius Thomas. But even better than that, Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders, the slot receiver for the Broncos, played a very good game and ended up with 2 touchdowns. The game-tying touchdown. And the game-tying touchdown and a really nice kind of stutter step slant. That was the game-tying touchdown. But earlier in the game, he caught another slant, but took it to the house, in between 2 defenders at the goal line, and was able to leap into the end zone. He's got the speed to, especially in talking about Peyton Manning, who we'll get to more in depth. He has the speed to make short throws into big plays. And that, I think, is very important in a Broncos offense that's kind of centered around the dink and dunk. You have Peyton Manning not really being commanded to throw the ball deep downfield. So those short passes, those intermediate routes, are really important, I think. And for a player like Emmanuel Sanders, a slot receiver, a guy with speed, a guy with quickness, he's going to be very valuable. And I know a lot of people took him maybe 5th, 6th round as a wide receiver too. And he's going to do great for you this season. Oh, I haven't been streaming long drinking. How you doing, man? I got on a little late today, about 6:15. So I'm just talking about Thursday night. How was your week? But the last thing, and this kind of goes into the conversation that I had this week in my GroupMe chat with my money league, and a bunch of other, I've seen it on ESPN, on NFL.com. Yeah, my fantasy week was split last week. I had one team that did very, very well. My money league, I did all right. I also face Khalees in my money league, but I had the Panthers. I had the Panthers defense. But my team ended up doing okay. I split I'm in 4 leagues. I only count really 2 of them. There's a Twitch league that I drafted on stream. And we lost in that one. And it was mainly due to Dez going down. Because I wanted to do something kind of crazy. So I drafted wide receiver 0. Or not wide receiver, running back 0. Which just means you don't reach for any running backs who are out of average draft position, and we had the last pick in the first round, so almost all the running backs were off the board. I think I kind of broke it because I didn't take C.J. Anderson, which, as you saw last night, was not a bad idea. But we have 2 wide. Actually, let me pull up that league. We have 2 wide receivers that. Yeah, last week we had 2 wide receivers and Dez Bryant and Victor Cruz out. Antonio Brown had a great game. but we were able to kind of we lost in that league, but in my money league I won, despite starting last week Peyton Manning. I started him this week again, and he did fairly well in the league I'm in because passing touchdowns count for a lot. Keenan Allen, though. The funny thing is, I had in this league, we have Des Bryant, Victor Cruz, and Keenan Allen and Antonio Brown. That's what happens when you don't draft running backs. You get all the wide receiving talent. So last week we had Keenan Allen in the slot, like in the wide receiver running back flex position. But we mainly lost because Dez wasn't there, and Eli didn't have a good game. But I think I started Phillip Rivers last week, so that wasn't a big deal. Yeah, the other thing is, we talked about the Giants a little bit last week. That game was heartbreaking, FYI. But I remember saying that Rashard Jennings was... I had misgivings about him. I didn't think he would get that much. He did get the goal line touches, which I thought Andre Williams might be in that mix, but Rashard Jennings got all the goal line touches, which makes him, I think, stronger than he once was. He still only is going to get you like 50 yards, but if he gets goal line touches, and the Giants really don't have that go-to big wide receiver, and even their tight end is kind of more of a out in the flats kind of middle post tight end. They don't have a real big like Kevin Benjamin, Mike Evans, like in the old days when they had Plaxico. So they're gonna go to Rashard Jennings, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Because he's still only gonna get you maybe 50 yards in the course of the game. And Shane Vereen had a good PPR game. He had, I think, 7 receptions for 50-something yards. But he's going to be the one on third down. He's going to be one in passing situations. I don't know where Andre Williams is going to fit in this. I think he's going to only be viable if Rashad goes down to injury. Yeah. But I think the Giants' running game is very matchup dependent, like you're saying. Like this week, they're going against Atlanta, and Rashad Jennings is a strong play against Atlanta. DeMarco Murray had a bad game statistically. He had like 15 yards rushing, but had a touchdown rushing and a touchdown receiving. Atlanta's defense is just not very strong. That game I probably won't talk about that much, but yeah, if you have... In that game, it's basically, if you have somebody on the Giants or the Falcons and are considering starting them, or they are the starter, you use the draft pick on them, start them without much worry. It's a good game to play. Yeah, this is the league that we drafted running back 0. So we didn't draft running backs that were out of average draft position. So we kind of had to reach for stuff. So it's not a strong running back team. Kind of the reason why we have Latavius Murray, I think, will do better as the season goes along. But this week actually has 2 running backs with 2 very good matchups. Lamar Miller and Doug Martin. And this isn't my money league, so I'm not as... This is the league that I drafted as on Twitch, on the stream. My money league, I have a little bit more diversity. My wide receivers aren't as strong, but I started Brandon Marshall last league. Am I rolling with Eli for the year? In that league, probably not. That league is kind of like on stream, we're talking stuff out. Like, part of me wants to pick up Tyrod Taylor and just start him for a couple weeks, because I just like watching him play. In this league, we drafted kind of interestingly. This was my money league, which is more competitive. A good amount of money's on the line, so people take it more seriously. Peyton Manning did well for me last night, and that was a risk play. And this is actually where I was going when you jumped in the chat. We've been getting like in the group me for that league, and for everybody else, the group me for that league. We were talking about is Peyton Manning done, and I don't think he is. And one of the things, like going into the season, everybody was down on Peyton Manning. The numbness in his fingers, the duck balls that he's been throwing, and a lot of people were saying, yeah, it's his age, it's everything that's catching up with him. And then there was this interesting NFL.com kind of podcast. It wasn't like a little vlog with Kurt Warner, former St. Louis Rams quarterback, Arizona Cardinals quarterback, won a Super Bowl with the Rams, went to another Super Bowl with the Cardinals, and played into his 40s or late 30s, and was successful most of that time. And he talked about older quarterbacks and saying that in looking at the game tape, Peyton did miss a couple throws, but it was more due to hesitancy on his part than his lack of strength. He brought up several throws in the game where he actually had a ball. This was the Ravens game. Had a ball dropped in the end zone, where he was able to put it between the safety and the cornerback who was trailing. And it was just interesting to watch because you saw zip-on passes. And when I was watching the game live, I felt like he was slow too. But if you looked at it play by play, it was actually a pretty decent game. And where he did do badly, a lot of it has to do with Gary Kubiak and the new system, which is more under center, quick reads, hot reads. And Peyton's used to a shotgun situation, audibles, and checks, and developed routes. So the hesitancy in his throws, or the quickness of his throws to get it out there before the receiver is turned around, has caused the 2 pick sixes in the Ravens game and in this week's game. Because Peyton Manning is just trying to deliver the ball where he knows it should be in his system, while Gary Kubiak's system has been based around lesser quarterbacks. It's been based around the Matt Schaubs, the Ryan Malletts of the world. And when you have quarterbacks like that, you have to create a system that is suited to their strengths. I do remember that hit, and he talked about that on the stream on his podcast about how older quarterbacks need to stay upright, and one of the things Peyton Manning has problems with, is his offensive line. And Gary Kubiak's system is designed to have, zone blocking running schemes. And because the Broncos' running game isn't there yet, you have Peyton Manning having to be in these difficult down and distance situations, yet not being in his kind of quick, hurry-up offense. So it's slow, it's methodical, and it's very predictive. And that's what's getting him into trouble. Like, once they were down 14-0, the Broncos went into their hurry-up mode. Peyton was calling the audibles at the line, and then it was 14-14. I mean, it just is about comfort in the system. The Denver defense is scoring so many points in fantasy football. After last week, I looked to see who in my money league had the Denver defense, because I was looking at waiver wire stuff, and unfortunately they were picked up already. But the person who had them, I forget who it was now. Well, anyway, the person who had them didn't start them this week. Even though you have Jamal Charles, so I can kind of see it. But the team they started was the same team they started last week, and only got them like 5 points. So I don't understand what that's going on. Figure out. The one offensive player who has been playing well and who has got in both games, fantasy wise, has been great. Is Emmanuel Sanders. Um, the shorter range of the offense that they're playing in has gotten Emmanuel Sanders a lot of looks. He had 2 touchdowns last night. He had 1 touchdown the week before. Or no, he didn't have a touchdown. He had just had a good amount of yardage. Yeah, um, but he played very well, and he's gonna thrive because he's getting all those slot looks, and that is like Peyton Manning is now in those check modes and in everything where a Wes Welker would play. That's what Emmanuel Sanders is getting, and if he's gonna keep getting that, he's in the Antonio Brown mix where you just start him and just let it go, like he's gonna get you points. And I think the idea that Peyton Manning is done as a reliable fantasy quarterback is kind of overhyped. I mean, it's something the media is going to talk about for the length of the season, but I think it's a little overhyped. But I also think that it gives people who do have Peyton Manning or who might want to trade for Peyton Manning or trade away Peyton Manning a little bit of, for those who want to trade away him, last night's game helps you. For those people who want to trade for him, last night's game is validation that it's a good idea. But the media is still going to talk about his weaknesses, so you might be able to get him cheaper than you normally would. And then finally, you have the people who have him but might have another quarterback or might be looking at the waiver wire to see what quarterbacks are out there. And if the Broncos have a bad matchup, if they come against a defense like the Ravens or the 49ers defense, as the 49ers defense is great, which I was very surprised by. If you come against defenses like that, it's okay to bench Peyton Manning if you have a very good backup. This week, for instance, in the Money League, let's see, I'll go full screen. For instance, in the Money League, I had Ben Roethlisberger as my backup, which normally would be a strong play, but he's going against the 49ers defense, and the 49ers look really good against the Vikings. I know it's two very different teams. I know the Vikings don't have wide receivers that are really threats. They don't have Antonio Browns. They don't have Marcus Wheatons. They just don't have those kind of players. They also don't have a offensive line like the Steelers do. But still, saying all that, they don't have Heath Moon. Saying all that, it's still, when I looked at what the Chiefs did last week and how they let Ryan Mallett come in and throw 2 quick touchdown passes and tightened up that game to a Houston Texans team that really, for all intents and purposes, should not have been anywhere close to in that game. And their best corner, or it's arguable now, because the rookie Peters played a very good game last night at corner. He's the one who had the pick six. I think his name is Stevens. I'm not that familiar with Kansas City, but their star corner is still suspended. So their passing, it made me think that there's a possibility. He's on your bench instead of flat. Yeah. Forsett, I am not down on. It's just that, like, this isn't a finalized lineup. What I was doing was looking at, I don't think Forsett is down on. I do think that he's going to be kind of, he didn't get as many touches as I thought he was going to, without Bernard Pearson. They gave it to their backup a decent amount. And his backup looked pretty good, actually. And I guess that's the problem with Forsett. He's always going to have a backup who looks pretty good because the Ravens make running backs look good. But no, I think I put Forsett down because originally, yeah, right, he had an injury designation, and it wasn't something I saw in the game, so I pulled him to my bench. He's going to go into that second flex spot, most likely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're talking about the Denver defense to the Raider defense. Now, the Raiders have a decent defense, but it's not comparable. The Raiders are also an offense that isn't going to do much. And if you have Flacco, who struggled a lot, his backup, I can get that for you. What's his backup's name? Let's go to league depth charts. Oh, that's my depth chart. Baltimore. Oh, why is it taking so long? There we go. Allen, Javaris Allen. He ended up having a better.
Sterilized sites.
Multiple foreign objects
Sorry
in the body.
Treasures.
Can't do anything with that.
If you're the guy from the operation game, you get operated on. It's what you do.
Javorius Allen.
If you want to save 15% or more on car
he's a
insurance,
rookie
you
out of
switch to
USC.
Geico. It's what you do.
What are you doing with your lineup? I want to hear about this. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I want to hear about what you're doing with your lineup. Because I've had some crazy ideas this week, but I don't think I'm going to actually do any of them. Yeah, I mean, for him, I think that you definitely can find a better replacement. Like I was talking, I think this was before you got here drinking. Niles Davis, the backup for Jamal Charles. Benching Cam Newton and playing Johnny Football. Who are the Browns playing this week? Cleveland. Tennessee. The only reason I would say you're crazy, it's not crazy for benching Cam and playing Johnny. It's crazy only in my mind because of the matchup. Because I think Johnny Football in certain matchups is worth rolling the dice on. The only reason I wouldn't do it this week is because Carolina is playing Houston. Houston has a decent defense, but their defense is really J.J. Watt. It's J.J. Watt and a bunch of nobodies. Brian Cushing as a linebacker is also very good. But as we saw last week when they went against Kansas City, Alex Smith was tearing them up. If Alex Smith, a quarterback who last night barely got to 150 yards, also throwing 2 interceptions. Again, Denver defense, I realize that. But the Texans on the back end aren't that good. They've got a decent line. You got Clowney maybe ending up being worth his draft stock someday. You have J.J. Watt. You have Brian Cushing in the middle. What that does, though, is halts the Carolina run game. Jonathan Stewart is already a little bit banged up. It might force Carolina to throw it a little bit more. And Carolina's defense is going to keep them in games. So the thing you got to worry about is if it's going to be a 12-12 football game. The Browns are playing at home against Tennessee. Not saying Tennessee's defense is anything special. I would say that Houston's defense might be stronger. But the thing with Tennessee is, which you didn't really get to see when they played Tampa, is they are going to be kind of a ball control offense. Yeah. the thing with the thing that I would worry about with Johnny Football isn't that he posts Johnny Football is going to get a good amount of rushing yards, but one, Josh McCown, if healthy, I think they said would play. I don't know. I looked at some of the injury report, but he wasn't listed as being in or out at the last check. So let's see. What's the latest? Menzel to start. Okay. So he is starting. Huh. I just worry about in going with Menzel against Cam. The thing I worry about is not so much Tennessee as Johnny Menzel being able to make reads. Even in the game, like he had. Yeah. Well, that was part of it. Was in the 2 picks, and he still got 14 points. Was he did throw 2 touchdowns, and they were throwing from the middle of the second quarter on. That's why Doug Martin had a bad game statistically, but he was only in for a quarter and a half. He got 50 yards in a quarter and a half. After that point, it was 35-7, and Tampa Bay was dropping back every play, trying to get back in the game, or trying to get Jameis Winston some confidence. So I don't think Tennessee is necessarily going to be in that position against Cleveland. I think it's going to be a tighter game. I think that because it's a tighter game, and it's not kind of a game where it's already out the window, you're not going to have a quarterback dropping back that much, especially Johnny Football, when you have running backs in Cleveland, even though they didn't do anything last week. Cleveland does have a decent running game. And their wide receivers, when you say Johnny Football has more weapons than Cam, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Cam has Greg Winslow. Cam has perhaps Devin Funchess, the rookie who they say is of Kelvin Benjamin level in terms of his athleticism, his ability to go get the ball. Yeah, it's a gamble. I see the positive of it, because I think the positive of it, and the thing that you might be looking at too, is that Cam probably won't get many rushing yards. Oh, Alex Smith more than Cam. Oh, Alex Smith definitely has more weapons than Cam. You're right about that. Alex Smith has way more weapons than Cam. But in the last thing I'll say about the Johnny Football thing is, Johnny Manziel, again, in Cam Newton, the one thing that Johnny Manziel will get more of than Cam Newton this week, and I'm pretty sure of it, Johnny Manziel will have far more rushing yards. The one thing that he'll get with a full week, and might be worth it, and I can see this as a risky play, but one that may very well work out for you, Johnny Manziel is going to get a lot of rushing yards compared to Cam. Cam is thought of as a running quarterback, but against the Texans, when you have a really good, really fast, and agile linebacker in Cushing, and a terrific defensive end in Watt, you're not going to see Cam scramble as much. He'll get hurried and get out of the pocket more, but I don't think he's going to really be able to get those, 20-yard chunk runs. Whereas Manziel against the Titans probably has an opportunity to get those. And I think that it just comes down to, does Johnny Manziel throw few enough interceptions for the rushing stats to poison him up, or is he in the position where he'll get a rushing touchdown? Because I think you're gonna. The thing I would worry about Manziel is him throwing a lot of picks early, and then Cleveland basically taking the ball out of his hand, just running it, and trying to just make it through the game that way. because I think their defense and their corners are good enough to frustrate a rookie quarterback in Mariota. Because Mariota looked good against the Bucks, but they're also the Bucks. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think the Titans' defense is anything special. I feel like you say, and I agree that, but I think that the Texans' back end is just bad. It's just really bad. It's their linebacking core and two people on their defensive line, that one being J.J. Watt, who's MVP caliber. So whenever you have a player like that, he can always change a play. I don't see the Titans having anybody who's, in that realm on their team. So, yeah, I mean, I personally probably wouldn't do it just because I think Cam's matchup is okay. But if you're in a close matchup, like if you're in a matchup where you might have to make up some points, like, the projections don't seem to be going in your favor, or he has a big advantage, or he or she has a big advantage at another position, Johnny Manziel is worth the risk in that situation because his upside is higher than Cam's. Cam is the safer play, but Johnny Manziel, upside fantasy-wise, in that game is higher. So it's more boom or bust, but at the same time, if you're chasing points or if you're in a position where the other player has a position that they have a good gain on you, or like say it was week 1 and they had Dez and Antonio Bryant and you had just okay receivers, that would be the time. Stick Johnny Football in, he'll make up the point differential and I can beat him at the running back position or something like that. Oh, I see. So you're already behind. Yeah. Then Johnny Manziel is probably the way to go. And the thing is, Khalees, I know why. Like, I saw the game and I saw what the Denver Broncos defense was doing to Alex Smith. They were jumping all over his routes. They knew where he was going with the football. Which made the Chiefs really shorten their game plan. It was really quick stuff out of Alex Smith. And Khalees is a good tight end. And I think he'll be good going deeper in the season. It's just, like, Aqib Talib on his interception knew exactly where the play was going at the snap. He took one step back and immediately beelined in front of Macklin. He knew where that pass was. It just felt like the Denver Broncos defense was a step ahead of the Chiefs all game long, even when they were down. Like, when they were down, it was more of the offense not putting them in bad positions than the defense, falling apart. Yeah, I mean, I trust him in most situations. I think last night I would have trusted him too. It was hard to forecast how good Denver would be at reading Kansas City. Like, they're a great defense, but they knew what Kansas City was doing. Like, it wasn't like they knew where Kansas City was going with the football. So I think that was the difference. But yeah, the Broncos defense put on a show last night. So yeah, Manziel's worth the gamble. So before we go, well, I got about another 15 minutes or so. So let's go through Sunday. And drinking, you can feel free to interrupt if you got a game that you want to talk about, or anybody else in the chat, because there's a couple of other people in the chat. We'll just there's a couple games that I wanted to highlight. One being New England Buffalo. What do I think about Mariota? I think he is a good quarterback for a rookie, but the Bucs made him look much better than he actually is. He has a quick release. He's got a player to go to in Kendall Wright, who can get open. But at the same time, I do not think that he's going to match the success that he had week 1 against Cleveland. Cleveland has several good corners. Like if we go back to the Cleveland, Tennessee stat line for a little bit and just look at the complete stats. On defense, you have Joe Hayden at corner, Dante Whitner, Carlos Dansby. You have a much better defense than the Bucks have. The Bucks, the other reason being, the Bucks haven't spent, and I did not know this until last weekend's game against the Titans, because I watched some of it before it became too much of a blowout. Yeah. No, don't worry about interrupting. Interrupting's fine. It's much easier to talk and answer questions than it is to just, because if I just went off of the couple notes that I had, the show would be like 20 minutes, man. So it's much better if you ask questions. But the Mariota was in a game that I wanted to talk about anyway, so I'll just talk about. We talked a lot about the Cleveland Browns game. I was going to talk about it mainly because the Cleveland Browns running back situation is so in flux. And also I wanted to get to Kendall Wright as being a player that most people have, but I saw him be picked up in 2 leagues. Like, I was able to pick him up in 1 league. He was on the waiver wire, which I kind of get because Nate Washington is also on the Titans. So people thought he would be the number 1. But Kendall Wright, man, if you need a wide receiver and he's available, he's where Mariota's going. And yeah, the Browns running back situation to me was very interesting because going into the season, I really expected them to have a good running back situation. I thought it would be more of we talking about who in their committee would, stand out rather than are any of them worth anything. Because, look, if you looked at last week's game, their top 2 rushers were quarterbacks. I just wouldn't have expected it. I think that their offensive line is just that poor. Because, they have Isaiah Cromwell. And I just thought that him and the rookie Johnson would give them kind of an interesting dynamic, especially since they let go of Terrence West. It felt like Isaiah Crowell had won the job. He was going to do something special this season. But, I mean, so far, I don't know how many carries he had last week. I know it wasn't a lot. 12. He had 12 carries for 20 yards. It just feels like they're... Obviously, the game... The other thing was the game didn't really get away from them. I mean, they lost badly, but the Jets didn't pile it on until Fitzpatrick got really comfortable and started understanding what I said last week is, when in doubt, throw it to Brandon Marshall. The Jets' defense is the best part of their team. Yeah, the defense is the best part of their team, but their offense isn't that bad. I mean, and I talked about this with you last week a little bit, and we could talk about the Jets game at Indianapolis as part of it because it's something I wanted to say too. The thing that I was thinking about when I thought about the Jets in our conversation last week, Chris Ivory had a very good game. Brandon Marshall had a very good game. Ryan Fitzpatrick did what he was supposed to in managing the team. Like when you're going against the Jets' defensive line, it's going to be hard. But I also think their offensive line broke down a lot in situations where really Cromwell didn't have to make a lot of decision making. Like it was like there was only 1 or 2 possible holes, and he was still getting blocked out. It just felt like he didn't have an understanding of the game flow. and 1.7 rushing yards, it's hard to argue that the two highest rushers on their team were quarterbacks. They just didn't. It wasn't that they weren't trying to run the ball, it's just they couldn't. I mean, this week, Tennessee, they'll have a better time trying to do it, and I think the game is going to be slower. I don't think it's going to be high scoring like it was last week. Hey, Trick Shot. Oh, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm happy to have people in here, man. As you see, if you have a question or if you want to talk about something, please put it in the chat so we can discuss it. Drinking's a cool guy. Accept my friend request. Where'd you send me a friend request, man? Was it on here or was it a follow or something on Twitch? Because I'll definitely do that. And if I'm misreading where it's from, just send me a message. But yeah, the other thing that I wanted to talk about in the Jets game is the Jets going against the Colts and how the Colts had a very poor game last week. Andrew Luck ended up throwing 2 late touchdown passes. But, like we were talking about Frank Gore being his backup probably coming on. Okay, I'll look for that trick. I'll definitely do that as soon as I get off tonight. But we were talking last week about Frank Gore's backup, and Frank Gore and Andre Johnson both had poor games last week, and I don't think they'll have much better time of it against the Jets, who have a very solid defense. I don't know where the Colts are going to go, because I know T.Y. Hilton, they say he's going to be fine, but he had an injured knee, and even if he starts, he's going to have to deal with Revis. So whenever you're talking about Revis or another top-tier cornerback, you wonder who's the second option going to be. Who's going to be the person to keep the offense moving when it's in those one-on-one situations? And Andre Johnson, was targeted, but wasn't able to do much. Like, they weren't deep throws. They weren't traditional how we think of Andre Johnson throws. Frank Gore wasn't able to get anywhere, really. And I just didn't see the Colts offense how it typically functions. It looked like they struggled. It looked like they'll struggle even more against a better team. And I just think that there's a lot that they need to work out. And I don't know if it's worth starting Andrew Luck. I know you probably spent a really high draft pick on him, but I think there are a lot of better options, especially this week against the Jets. But even going forward, until the Colts have an identity of what they want to do on offense, it's going to be hard to trust Luck. And I think when we're talking about trusting quarterbacks, I trusted Peyton Manning this week just because I didn't believe the hype around him, his diminished capacity. And he did okay. He did pretty well. I'll give him that. He did pretty well. But it was once he got into his offense, once he got into his comfort zone. And I don't know if Luck knows what his comfort zone is. He doesn't know where to go with the football. He doesn't have that Ahmad Bradshaw check down in Frank Gore. He's not really... He's throwing the ball a lot. He dropped back 49 times in their game. And it's not that I would say that I just don't trust... It's not that I say don't trust him for the season. It's just going... when you watch game to game, you've got to look at... what do I think about deflated balls? About the Patriots controversy, I do think the Patriots... I'm a Giants fan, so I'm biased. But I think the Patriots cheat in the past. But I don't think this controversy, this whole Tom Brady thing, I think that was very fabricated. I don't really see... they won that game by such a convincing margin. I don't think that deflated football has really had anything to do with it. If you talk about them going back to filming stuff, there's debate on whether or not that was legal at the time that they did it, or to the extent that they did it. The Patriots, I mean, they're the Patriots. They're a great team. They would be a great team without, you know, bending the rules. But that's who they are. That's the team that they are. They're the team. They're the big dude on the block. They're always going to be it. They cheat, but they win. You know, I mean, I'm just happy that my team, whenever they face them in the Super Bowl, we're able to knock them off. So it's not like they couldn't cheat Eli. They couldn't cheat the Giants, and they couldn't cheat those game-winning drives that Eli had. So, I mean, you know, bending the rules only gets you so far. The Bills matchup, I'm glad you asked about it, because I've got 2 more games I want to talk to after the Bills matchup. But the Bills matchup is definitely on my list because I love Tyrod Taylor. But also because Percy Harvin is interesting in that I don't think he's going to, you know, get a lot. The thing is with the Bills are going to focus on the running game. They're going to be ground and pound. They're going to be Rex Ryan. They're going to try to win the game based on their defense. But the New England defense isn't all that strong. The New England defense isn't a defense that is going to... I don't think if LeSean McCoy is truly healthy, and there's some question to that. As a McCoy owner, you've seen the injury updates as much as I have. But he practiced today, so he's a go for Sunday. Or he's questionable, but most people assume that he's a go. So Sunday, just check, but most likely he's going to be a go. The thing about the Patriots defense is they don't have that, like we were talking about the Texans and how they have a shutdown defensive end, a stout linebacker. They don't have that in New England. So there's a real question about their secondary too. I mean, they have Butler, who was the savior of the Super Bowl and has since risen to being one of their top corners. Whether by design or whether he truly is that good. But I think McCoy, I think Harvin, I think they're good plays. Like, I'm not scared of the Patriots' defense, and I don't think anybody should be. The real question isn't really about the Patriots' defense. It's whether or not McCoy's 100%. And as a McCoy owner from when he was in Philadelphia, I saw LeSean McCoy. It was a Monday night game. I don't remember who it was against. It might have been Dallas. I'm not sure. I just remember this vividly. Monday night, I'm down maybe 10 points in my fantasy matchup. LeSean McCoy, right before halftime, takes a shot. Looks done. Looks injured. Looks like it's going to be weeks where he's not going to go back. He comes back in the second half and rushes for 150 yards. If LeSean McCoy can play, don't worry about him. The Bills' offensive line is not great, not bad, but the thing that you compare is, can LeSean McCoy beat the New England defense? And in my mind, he can. Oh, you're worried about his backup? I mean, the worry that you have is valid. It's not so much, but the thing is, Rex never had a running back of McCoy's caliber. Chris Ivory is good, but he's not a LeSean McCoy. LeSean McCoy will make you miss completely. I fell like... Oh, what did trick shot say? I missed it. No, like it's a TV show. No, Trick might have dipped into it, but yeah, like Rex does split carries, but this is his first stud RB. But he split carries mainly because he was wearing out running backs. Like he was giving running backs 40 carries in a game. He couldn't do that, so he was splitting it between a couple. He can give LaShawn McCoy 25, 30 carries, and I think Carlos Williams has an ability to be viable as an RB3, maybe a flex, because they're gonna run the ball so much. But I don't think that it's necessarily because LaShawn McCoy is not going to be the star. Six Pierce, I can barely type. Trick is the man that we all want to be. Nah, man. I'm glad you're here, though. I hope I'm entertaining enough, because I feel like that would be a waste if I wasn't entertaining you. Especially if you're having such a good night, man. I know it's Friday. We got to turn up. But yeah, so to your question, drinking, I think I would be comfortable with Sean McCoy just because in my personal experience, he's always been reliable. And I'm not scared of the Rex thing. I think Rex actually helps him. Yeah. But I like Tyrod Taylor. I like Harvin. One player of interest who some people might be needing a flex, might need a player to pick up. Dion Lewis for one more week. Dion Lewis this week, because the Bills are attacking, because the Bills are a strong offensive front, and can cover. They have the cornerbacks to cover. Dion Lewis out of the backfield is going to probably see some of Julian Edelman's looks. Drink and watch the games. Drink and watch the games. It's going to be, yeah. Lewis is a solid pickup back out of the backfield, because I think he's gonna take some of Edelman's work, just because they're not going to be able to focus completely on. Because the Patriots aren't going to be able to, hold the Bills on the defensive line. Brady usually tears up the Bills, but I don't think he has the wide receivers to do it. He has Edelman, who's not a wide receiver who's going to beat you deep, and he has Gronk, and Gronk is going to present a matchup problem, but I don't see him being amazing. Amazing in that game. He's an amazing fantasy player. You still play him, but I don't think you expect 3 touchdowns. But the other 2 games that I want to talk about, and these are both going to be kind of quick. Potential shootout in Dallas and Philly. The real question is, what is Chip Kelly doing, and are we ever going to understand it? DeMarco Murray somehow had a good fantasy game last week, even though he had 25 total yards. No, drinking, in your position, you start Johnny Football because you need it. I don't think Cam's going to get you the points you need. Even if Johnny Football has a bad game, if you compare it to what Cam Newton would do, I don't think he's going to get you the points you need to make up the difference. But I'm probably going a little long here, right? But drinking, I took your advice. We're going to add a Tuesday stream at about 7 o'clock. So if you have anybody else, and I'm going to put up my Twitter on Twitch. I'm gonna be streaming some other games and stuff, but the Fantasy Football Show will be Tuesday at 7 and Friday at 6. Yeah. Stash him for that small hope. Him and Tyrod. Oh, yeah, 7 p.m. Eastern. So it's going to be a little bit later. The only reason on Tuesday it's going to be later is because I box on Tuesday. But I'll be home in time to be on for the 7 p.m. stream. And on Tuesday streams, we're going to talk about is the weekend review. We're going to kind of review what we did on our fantasy team, how we won, did we win, did we lose, what we could have done to to make a difference in that, recap some of the games, and talk about waiver wire. So that's going to be Tuesday's stream. So Tuesday's got a lot of stuff in it. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be good, but it's also going to be kind of packed. So I'm going to have to plan it out a little bit better. And the last game that I want to talk about is Tampa Bay and New Orleans. And Tampa Bay got roughed up. No question about it. They got roughed up. And New Orleans is known as a great team, is known as a great offensive team. But what we're going to find out on Sunday is how bad are the Bucs. And will Drew Brees and his wide receiving core Yeah, I mean, I'm open to doing a lot of things, and I'm gonna try a lot of things. I like the idea of Tuesday. Yeah, but have a good night at work, and I'll see you later, man. But yeah, but on the Tampa Bay New Orleans game, just the hope that the Bucs. I think the game is interesting because does New Orleans go back to what has traditionally made them a great offense, and that's airing the ball out. They spent all offseason saying they need to run the ball, trading Jimmy Graham to get an offensive lineman and a draft pick that they used on the defensive side. They wanted to get stronger, they wanted to get tougher, they wanted to get more physical. But they were a finesse team. And I don't know if you change like that overnight, or in this case in one offseason. So my hope is that New Orleans will be more balanced. They won't give Ingram the ball 3 straight carries like they did last week. And in the game, they ended up losing Arizona. Arizona's defense is much better than Tampa Bay's. We don't even have to talk about that. But the question is, how does New Orleans play their game? And it's my hope that they actually play the game that they're used to, their finesse game, and that makes Drew Brees more viable. And I think it also helps their running game because it will help their running backs have more holes. Because Arizona starts stacking the box against New Orleans, and that just is kind of mind-boggling because New Orleans can throw on anyone. Why are you stacking the box? But it's just because New Orleans was so out of their traditional game plan. And I hope that they kind of get back to that. The other side of the ball, I hope Tampa Bay is able to make it a game. They usually play New Orleans kind of close, even if they're having a bad season. Last season they beat New Orleans, even though I think it might have been one of their 1 or 2 wins in the season. But to protect Jameis Winston, they have to run the ball earlier. I like Doug Martin last week. He had 50 yards, but he had like 40 of those yards on one drive that got Tampa Bay into the red zone. The problem is they went away from running the ball. They went to Jameis Winston to throw it. And I understand you have a franchise quarterback. You want to put him in situations where he gets the experience. But if they want to win, if they want to try to, put him in better situations, they got to run more. They got to lean on Doug Martin. They got to give him the ball a lot. And I want to see them do that. And Lovie Smith is a smart enough coach. And a coach who has had good running backs in the past. He's had a Matt Forte. He's been on the Bears. He's had quarterbacks who struggle and had the wherewithal to slow the game down. And I really hope that Tampa Bay slows the game down while New Orleans at the same time tries to speed it up and to see which of those wins out. But that would make it not only a more entertaining game, but a better fantasy game for those who participate in it. I think that there's a lot of people who wonder what to do in New Orleans. I ended up picking up Coleman, their big wide receiver, who had more looks than Marcus Colston, who had their goal line touchdown. He was the one who made the extra reach to get the touchdown. So he had 41 yards and a touchdown. He's the one who I think is going to end up being the player that they utilize in the red zone. And I hope that not only is that the case, but I hope that that becomes a good starting point for a breakout season for him. And I think Coleman could be a good player to get He's definitely available in your league, almost assured. Like I'm in a 12-team big money league, so everybody's combing over the waiver wire. Everybody's got every receiver, and Coleman was still available. So if he's available in that league, he's probably available pretty much everywhere. And I think that with a quarterback like Drew Brees, you can't count out a player like that. Wide receivers can be as good as they want, but as we saw with Stevie Johnson, if you don't have a good quarterback and you finally get one, you can do something really impressive. And I think that's the same thing with Brandon Coleman. It's not that he's a rookie, he's young, but he has one of the best quarterbacks probably of all time to throw him the football. So, and that's kind of the last game I wanted to discuss. So if nobody in the chat has anything that they want to talk about, I'm just going to end it here. And that's pretty good. We had like about an hour and 15-minute stream. And I think we got to a lot of subjects. We talked about Thursday night football. We talked about a lot of games on Sunday, a lot of potential matchups, a lot of good stuff. Got a lot of people involved. We got a couple people talking in chats. That's always good. And just to talk about what I'm going to be doing, I mentioned it to Drinking, who was in the stream earlier, but I'm going to be adding a Tuesday stream, and the Tuesday stream is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern. And what we're going to do on that is talk about the Monday Night Football game, but also talk about the last weekend, kind of like going over who did well, who did poorly, look at the top fantasy producers, that kind of stuff. And we're also going to prepare our teams for the waiver wire that's going to come on Wednesday. You have to get in your waiver wire ads on Tuesday before Wednesday when most leagues pull waiver picks. So I think that Tuesday is a good day for that. And we may, every time I've done one of these streams so far, more people have come in, more people have stopped by, and I really appreciate it. And I really thank you guys, especially Drinking and Trick Shots, for talking in the chat. It's great when people are in here and participating. It makes it easier for me to communicate, to talk, so I appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Peace.